Well, on Anthony, you know, she was a fair and a Bradford and...
What does that mean? I mean, she was a high, is that more of a high society?
She was high society.
Oh, she was?
She was DAR, you know, Bradford Society, come on.
Okay. I didn't, well, I know she was DAR and everything, but I didn't know how.
So she was very important. Furthermore, she was giving concerts with her friend, and so she wasn't, you know, she wasn't tucked about it. I mean, Uncle Arthur was handy. He was around. So, you know, and I think they had a lot of fun when they were younger, really do. But Mother didn't have any money. Her family was, her father was a, I think he ran a pawn business in Providence. And he died early of a heart attack, of a stroke. He died on the trolley, he didn't die on the trolley car, but he had a stroke on the trolley car, and he died very quickly after that. And so my grandmother was bitter. I mean, she was a widow for 35 years, because Grandpa was fairly young.
So you didn't know him?
Yes, but I never really knew it.
Knew him, yeah.
I was only 2 when he died. But Nana was pretty bitter. She really was a bitter woman. And it was sad. Plus the bitterness, she wasn't very fond of Mother because she was the reason she had to get married in the first place. So Mother really, she had all that as a child.
Yeah.
And then Dad turns out to be a playboy, so she never had any security.
Was he having affairs as well?
No, I don't think he had affairs.
Okay.
I think he just played.
He was just out there having a good time.
Oh, there were women he played around with, but it wasn't serious.
Yeah.
He was just a playboy.
Yeah.
And I can remember the parties. I can remember the gin parties. Wally Randall, who was the son of the dean at Brown, coming in in the afternoon. They give me a nickel so I could go out and get ice cream. And so he'd play the piano and have stupid, absolutely stupid fun. And this went on.
But this is at your home?
At my house, yeah. And then somebody else would come in, and I get a nickel to go out and get another ice cream cone. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. So really, Dick and I were never secure.
No, I can...
And so the summer that this all came to a head, and she was frantic, but I don't think she was crazy. I think everything had boiled up to the point where she had to have some attention. And so she ran down the stairs of the house in Sackett Street with a package of matches and set her house on fire, set her skirts on fire. I was ironing. I was ironing a dress that I'd made that wasn't very good when it was done. And I grabbed, fortunately, we had a couch in the kitchen where Dad used to take naps. And there was a blanket on it. And I don't know how, I had presence of mind, but I grabbed the blanket and went down the stairs and threw her over it. But she got burned on one side of her body all the way down. Oh, it was horrible. That's not a nice memory to have.
Do you think, Barbara, if she, as a woman, lived now in this day and age, do you think that a lot of it was just the containment and not being able to deal with any issues at all, not knowing how to deal with them, that it all just kind of came out in...
I think today, somehow, we would have gotten some help.
Yeah.
But Jim and I were the only ones who really cared or did anything. Because my brother was younger. He'll tell you he did it, but it's all right, I don't care. But he was, well, no, I was in college, let's see, this was 1930. It must have been the summer of 35, because I graduated in 36. And so I was horrified, and I was scared.
Of course. Oh.
I was scared to death, and we got I guess I I guess somehow or other I had presence of mind to call. I don't even remember how.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I'm blacked out on it.
Yeah.
But I know that she was taken to Ordway in Boston. And now whether Aunt Annie helped me with that, which probably was happening.
Yeah.
But she went to Ordway in Boston. And they kept her there for quite a while. But it was terribly, finances were bad. I don't quite know why. But that next, see, this was in 35. And after it happened and she was taken to the hospital, Dick went to stay with Aunt Edith. And I went, and Jim's mother called and said, I would like to have you come here if you could. So I spent the last year of my college, 1935 to 36, living at Jim's mother's house.
Where was that?
It was in Washington Avenue, Providence, over near Edgewood. And she was just dear. She said, well, I've never had a daughter, and I've always wanted one. And she was just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And Aunt Edith was wonderful with Dad and with Dick. That's where they went. But that next spring, I graduated, and Jim did too. He got his doctorate at Princeton. So Mother and I drove to, Jim came home, and we went down to Princeton for the graduation. And of course we didn't know what he was going to do. We were engaged by that time because we went to see Mother at the hospital in Boston. And she said, oh, you're married. And I said, yes, we were married in April. Oh, good, she said, oh, good. But it was true, because when Jim came back from Princeton for the Easter holiday, we were having dinner at Sackler Street with Dad, because I made certain that he did. And Dad said, you know, you kids, you're not going to have a wedding, not now. You better get married right now. Because we've got to give up the idea of having a real nice wedding. So Jim said, oh, that's fine. It's like that anyway. So we called his mother, and he says, well, that's just wonderful. We'll have to get her outfitted somehow. And that was spring vacation week. This was the beginning of the week. And we rushed around, and Aunt Annie came down. We made arrangements for the Unitarian Church, which was in between my church and Jim's church. Didn't make any difference.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't know
really
that.
funny. We were married in the Unitarian Church. But there was a church on Adelaide Avenue where Dick and I had gone to Sunday school, so we knew it. But it was kind of silly, because at that time I was singing at St. Stephen's, and I could really have done it at St. Stephen's. But we were in a hurry, so it didn't make any difference.
It didn't make any difference, yeah.
So we called the Unitarian Church, and sure they'd do a wedding. And all my classmates appeared for the wedding. And my best friend, Alma Aldrich, who was also from Benevolent Street in Providence, she was my maid of honor. I got a suit at Cherry and Webb's with a fox collar on it, and it was just ridiculous. Dad loaned us the car, and we went, after the wedding, it was pouring rain, we went up to Boston, to the Copley Plaza for the weekend. That was our honeymoon. And we got the car, and we drove up to Ocean Park and had a lobster supper on the way. But we had a lot of fun. So we came back from Maine, and Jim had to go back to teach, and I had to go back to school. So he took the Greyhound bus back, and I went back to Mother Pratt's and got on the bus the next morning to school. And Dean Peggy Push Morris, who we used to call it, made this big announcement in the chapel. And of course, in those days, everybody thought it was going to be a shotgun marriage, so she made very sure that they know it was not. And so she made a great big speech about this marvelous young Princeton man who'd gotten all his fellowship money from Brown. And she made a saint out of it. I was so embarrassed. It's all right. It was done. And so then I finished.
Well, when did you and Jim get together?
Well, he finished. He came because it was spring break anyway. So there was only the rest of the spring to go. So I finished, and he got home for my graduation, and then we went back to his mother's house, packed up a suitcase, and went back to Princeton for his degree.
Oh, okay.
And it was a very happy day. It was a beautiful day, and it was so exciting. So then when the commencement exercises were over that next morning, we got back in the car, and I said, now what are we going to do? We haven't got a job. Where are we going to go? He said, well, there's a possibility of one in Gettysburg just heard about. Well, we'll find something. So we went back to Providence, to Mother's house, and under the door was a telegram offering a job at Princeton. That was it.
That was it.
That was it. Wow, were we happy.
Oh, my goodness. That
Wow.
must have been a happy day.
Oh, we were so thrilled.
Oh.
So then we were all ready to start our lives. And we went, got a apartment in Princeton on Prospect Avenue, and life went on.
And you really loved that atmosphere and being
We were there for
Princeton.
almost 10 years until the war, and then the war started messing everything up, and I thought Jim was have to go into the service. But when they looked at him, they took at the same time, they took all the language professors into this special service, breaking the codes, and they put all these language people into a special unit and to stay in Washington. He never got on a ship, but he had to go the regular watches of 8 to 12 and so forth.
Did you move then to...
So then we moved from Princeton to Washington, and we had David by that time. He was about 7 when we went to Washington. So that was the end of our beautiful little days in Princeton. So we were in Washington from 42 to 46.
And Martha was born there.
And Martha was born in Washington.
And then Debbie, was she when was she? No,
She wasn't born until Bloomington.
Oh,
She's 14 years younger than David,
I
and 8 years younger than Martha.
Okay.
And I think people in Bloomington thought I was crazy. They did, but I wasn't. I mean, my mother had told me a lot of times, oh, I wish I'd had another child. I needed more support. I don't know, it kind of haunted me. We came to New York in 1949 to Columbia, and I began to, the kids were getting older, and it was, I don't know, I just said, Jim,
Let's do it again.
let's do it again. So Debbie is our little spoiled girl, but happy.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, she is.
So, you know, my mother really, despite all the things that people talked about her, was to me a very bright, understanding woman. She understood the world without all this fuss and bother. Oh, Lord. 1936. You may be duplicating here, but that's all right. So we went to Princeton in 1936. We were in Maine in summer, and we bought a Plymouth Roadster, a 1929 Plymouth Roadster with a rumble seat for $89. So we had this old car, and in Maine, of course, we'd always had cats around, so we picked up a beautiful black coon cat and named her Sambo, and named him Sambo, And he rode in the back of that rumble seat all the way to Princeton. And we kept stopping where there were places, dirt places, where he could use it. But it was a hot, hot day in early September. And I remember we nearly died of the heat, but that was okay. And we didn't have very much money because, of course, Jim had really not really started. Had not much of a salary. His first salary was $1,200.
Now, did you work
No.
as well?
No.
No. Okay.
I didn't work at all.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Oh, I thought you did.
Not when we were in Princeton. I never
Okay,
worked.
never did.
I sang the Westminster Choir, though, at the Presbyterian Church. But we had a very nice apartment on Prospect Avenue, along where all the clubs are. It was a one bedroom and a living room, dining room, a little kitchen. And I was in seventh heaven. I mean, it was wonderful. Our furniture was cast off from my mother's old sofa and chair. And we had a wedding gift of a Duncan Fife table and 4 lampshades.
How did you get it all down there, the furniture?
We had it moved somehow. I can't remember. I don't think it was done professionally. I think some of the family took it down.
Now, did your mother ever get down there?
Oh, yeah, eventually,
Okay.
eventually. But of course, at that time, she was in the hospital when we moved down. And, but we had seen her. We had gone to see her when she said we were married. And that was fine. So we went out, we had an absolutely idyllic trip down to Princeton. And it was clear. I'm getting mixed up. I have another tale about the hurricane, but that's later. And so our lives started together. And of course, Jim, being the scholar that he was almost in the books all the time. But he was able to walk from the apartment to McCosh Hall on the Princeton's campus, where the classrooms were, where he taught. And his office mate was Sam Atkins, and they had just been married just the same time we had, but a year before, and he had been teaching in Waco, Texas, which was a little hard for the Atkins because they were down Easterners and they really didn't like it down there. So when Sam was offered a job as instructor the same time Jim was, he was delighted. So we became very close friends. We really bonded. And Jim and Sam would be in the office with the classics department, both of them working very hard, and of course they had mostly freshmen because they were teaching most of the languages. But every afternoon at 4 o'clock at Princeton before the war, all the faculty stopped for tea. And we went to one of the halls where we had tea.
So you would meet
the whole campus.
Jim there?
Yes, so we'd meet everybody. The dean's wives were important. They poured the tea.
Sounds very formal.
Oh, it was very formal. And we had the dean's wives were pourers, and then the other faculty wives were in charge of the cakes and cookies and fancy stuff. And the instructors' wives all made the toast. That was our job. But you see, we met everybody in each department, mathematicians, all the different departments. And also at that time, all new wives who had started in September were invited to the graduate dean's wife at the graduate school for tea to instruct us on how to behave.
It's almost like the military.
Oh, very much.
Yeah.
And so Dean Luther P. Eisenhardt's wife gathered us together and very seriously told us the things I remember, there are many things, but we must always wear our hats on Nassau Street to distinguish us from the townspeople. Yes.
And did you do that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you did.
We obeyed.
Oh, you did.
And then she
Did
said,
you ever question that?
no, we
No,
just
did it.
No. And there was the other thing, to be very careful. You always have clean linens. There's nothing like clean sheets and clean towels. I mean, she lectured us like we were children.
Yeah.
Well, we all took it. I mean, that was part of life. In a way, I think back, it was quite fun. And the chairman of the classics department, of course, which was our department, had us for a Sunday dinner and also told us how to behave.
So you got a repeat of the whole
a repeat
thing.
of the whole thing. So it was very formal. Very, very formal. And we obeyed.
Was there a certain protocol in terms of how you behaved towards the dean's wife, or, I mean, was there a separation there? It sounds like it.
The president's wife also had us, for tea.
Mm-hmm.
But there were no instructions from the president's wife. It was all taken by the deans. They all called on us with calling cards.
Oh, they did.
And one time, and this is the one I really remember that everybody was interested in, Dean Green's wife, engineering department, came to call and said a fur piece with the glass eyes,
Oh, yes.
and she came in very formally and dropped her cards in the hall where I had a dishwasher and sat down on the couch, and I sat and talked to her. And that black cat saw those eyes and jumped. And there was an old ad in the papers about the time to light a murad, which was a cigarette. I felt like that. I wanted to drop through the floor. But she was very sweet. I mean, she just, she understood, but not for me. My day was ruined.
No, did the cat actually go after the...
Went on the shoulder.
Oh.
Jumped on her shoulder. Things that happen to you unexpectedly. But there were times when I wasn't home and the chauffeur would come up and put the card under the door when they had they were making phone. Everybody on the faculty had.
Now, was this calling card done also, for instance, in Providence when you lived there? I mean, was this kind of thing
In
protocol?
Yeah,
No, not just at Brown, but I mean, if your family went to visit somebody else, did you have calling cards?
Mother did.
Oh, she did?
Yeah. They stopped after the war, though. I don't think they did it much after the war. But it was still being carried on in a way in the formal places.
Uh-huh.
So I think I've thrown them all away now, but I still have, I think, one or two of our cards. And on Sunday afternoons, those days, everybody went to tea at the dean's house or wherever at 4 o'clock, and you all went to tea. And it was very nice. It was very warm and hospitable. It's the kind of hospitality I miss today.
Yes.
And it was pleasant.
It was, well, it's a real community, too.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
say that.
It was and it was a very happy time those years in Princeton. Before the war, they were really quite lovely, and you learned a lot. You learned because each department shared with others, so that we learned.
Did you go to lectures and that type of thing?
Wonderful lectures, outstanding people. And we got involved with people in the philosophy department and religion departments. And the things that we related to us, we were very much part of it. And some of those, the Atkins are the best friends we've had for years. And many of the other people who were, Mike Oates, who later was chairman, is David's godparent. and the Godolphins was Eddie's, and they were all close friends. And those who are still alive are still close friends. And some of the students that Jim had, we see now, and even this year, Jimmy and Carol Armstrong, who were a student of Jim's, who now are in New Hampshire. He became president of Middlebury College, and every summer we've been together here. So the connections are a lifetime. They're a lifetime connection, and it's been very warm. I mean, I feel very grateful. So this has been, I mean, our academic life was a blessing.
Now, you were there during the war when it broke out then, too?
Yeah, when it broke out on Pearl Harbor, Jim and I were in the living room reading. We'd been to church. We joined the Trinity Church, and Jim was brought up in the Methodist Episcopal Church, and I was nothing. I mean, my grandmother took me to the Baptist Church in Ocean Park every Sunday. I couldn't go to the beach on Sunday. I had to sit and read on the front porch because she was a strong Cape Cod Baptist. Nana was. And I hated it. I just hated it. So when we were married and we got to Princeton, we decided that we would go to the Episcopal Church, mainly because of the strength of its history and its rather not fundamentalist approach. We did not like that. We had worked too much with philosophy and with history and with, the background of the Bible, and we just couldn't take that sort of sickening fundamentalist was what we really didn't like it. And so actually we just had friends, classics department friends, who took us to Trinity, and Jim's roommate at Princeton was a Palestinian, Nabi Faris, and Nabi was very, very close to us. In fact, he roomed with us the first year we were there, and became David Pratt's godfather.
Oh.
And so Nabi belonged to that church, and another couple in the classics department. And so when we were there, we were in flux. We didn't know what. Finally, I had sung at St. Stephen's Church in that Episcopal Church at Brown, and I really loved the liturgy and the music. And I said to Jim, well, we got to do something, and we decided that we would do that. So we were both christened at the Episcopal Church in Trinity, and we became members. And there we met a lot of other good friends that we still have, and it was a very nice experience. And Jim and one of the chaplain at the university got together every week and read the Bible. Well, Bill Eddy had him translate it into the Greek, so they were always trying to pull together what was real and what was not. And it was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. And there were other faculty members that had little, not formal courses, but away from the university, courses in religion and philosophy, and I went to those. So it was a rich, wonderfully rich life. It was wonderful.
How long were you there for?
Almost 10 years.
10 years.
We were married in 36. The war started in 42. Yeah. I think that's it. But I know that Jim and Sam, both the Army and the Navy, approached language professors all over the coast and asked if they would serve as cryptanalysis to look at, to break the codes, which they were trying to do. So from the time of Pearl Harbor, Jim and Sam did their usual teaching, and they stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning to take these courses that the Navy was sending to them. So in 42, we moved to Washington. Jim went down ahead of me to find a place to live. And then I packed David into the car. And I drove from Princeton to Washington with Dave and all our personal gear in the trunk. And that was the end of Princeton. But we didn't know it. We were planning to go back.
Oh, I was going to ask you if you ended up going back.
Well, we had planned to go back.
Yeah.
But the war years were terribly tense. And fortunately, we found a place to live.
Where, right in the
We
city?
started in Alexandria, Virginia. We had a little tiny house there. And it had a little backyard. And David was about 6 years old, I think. And we bought him a little Navy outfit. And when Jim would be walking down Constitution Avenue and saluting, David would salute too. It was awful cute. He was darling. But then the outfit moved from Constitution Avenue over to McLean. What's that?
McLean, Virginia?
Yeah, not McLean. Over at Connecticut Avenue, near Cleveland Park area. But they were on Wisconsin Avenue. Cleveland Park and Wisconsin go from Washington up into Maryland to Chevy Chase. And, oh dear, where the Naval Hospital is, Bethesda. So it was a hard move. I mean, it was a terribly hard move. And the boys, Sam and Jim, were tense and nervous. And
then you didn't have any of your friends around you either.
No, everybody got involved with the war.
Yeah.
They went off to be in the front, or they were doing something like they were doing important.
Did Princeton still continue? I mean, if they took some of their professors.
Oh yeah, but it continued, but it's awfully
at a different level.
Very much different, much different. But the chairman of the department went into the Marines. Everybody split. Everybody was doing something. Some of them went out to do the language school, which was in the Midwest somewhere. We were all broken up, everybody. But then they would have to come to Washington for something. I remember Mike came, and he had his dirty pants and all that. You got to do these for me, Bobby. I haven't got them clean yet. I said, not unless you give me your ration tickets. I couldn't feed them, unless I had the tickets to get the food.
So did you have to go out and wait, and were there lines and everything?
If there was meat anywhere. One of our friends who was with the Department of State, he was a plastics professor too. He was sent to Washington, and he was sent on these missions abroad to Greece and everything. And he and his wife had an apartment just down the street from us. And at least Elsa would get out earlier than I did. And she called it, they have bananas. You better get down there and get one for the baby. It was really. And we had a baby carriage for Martha that had wooden wheels. We wore them out.
Now, did you have a car?
Oh, no, but Sam kept his car. I was very angry because Jim, he just sold it. So we didn't have a car at all during the war, and not until they made them again. So we were without a car for quite a long while. And that kind of
That's why you
paralyzed.
wore the wheels out on the carriage. Because you had
We
to...
had to take public transportation everywhere we went.
Mm.
But on the whole, it was a very tense time. Washington was almost bedlam in those days, until FDR died. And that day, the whole city stopped. It was still. And we walked out down to the Cleveland Park shopping area, and you could hear nothing but the radios all over the city. Radios. It was incredible. And David, to this day, remembers it.
He does.
Yeah. We went to Arlington to the funeral procession, and to this day, it was very memorable. Couldn't forget it. But those years, even though they were tense, and the men were really pressed, in a way, they were very enriching too. His one day off was Wednesday, and I got hold of a black maid. Our next door, we were finally in a duplex up in Cleveland Park, and it was a beautiful place. It actually belonged to Mark Sullivan, the journalist. We rented it, and we really, despite all the tension, the four of us, Jeanette and Sam and Jim and I, and then Shirley and Elsa and another Princeton couple who lived too nearby, we really made the most of it. And we would get together and go down to the museum, to the art shows, and have lunch or whatever out. Only one or 2 days a week. But the women did things together. We made it as happy as we could. And we bought a record player, and we would get together and listen to the music in the nights when we could do it. And our next door neighbors, the Melvilles, were lovely people. And they had a son exactly the same age as David. And Richard would come over and pick up David. They'd go up to first grade at Phoebe Hearst School. And they're still friends.
I was going to ask you that. It sounds like they might be.
We're all still very close friends. So, and when Martha was born, my mother came to help. And she came to me in the hospital after Martha was born, and she said, "Barbara, you know what? Mrs. Melville is on the phone with the Duke of Duchess of Windsor." Oh, I said, "Really?" Well, that's true, she was, because Eugene was there to buy materials for the Windsors and for the British Empire from us to Britain, whatever we could help them with. And she had called and asked him to order air conditioning for them when they were in Bermuda. And he was furious with all the really necessary things. So he had been yelling on the phone, and Mother heard it. It was really funny. But there was, she was impressed by it.
Sure.
But those years we bonded, and we became very close friends. And since the war, they came to visit us here in Maine, and drove all through New England. We had a wonderful time.
Now, how long did your mother stay with you?
She only stayed until I was able to handle things myself, but she came to see me. And Jim's
was that a good time with? I mean, well, of course you had a new baby and everything, but
we had a wonderful time.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, by that time she was herself.
doing well.
Oh yeah.
I'm glad to hear that, because I never really knew what her life entailed.
And she was a great help to me in many ways. She took care of David once for a couple of weeks. For some reason that we were going somewhere.
So you were in the hospital, though, for a while. They kept you when you had Martha, probably, and she was back taking care of David then, though, too, right? You probably...
Well, she wasn't with me when David was born.
No, but I'm saying when Martha was born, then she came down to help you with David. Did she stay with David while you were in the hospital having Martha? Yeah.
Yep, she came to help. She really did help. And I think she enjoyed it. She loved being in Washington. And we had a very nice house. It was a pretty nice house. It had 3 bedrooms and a lovely fireplace. And it was a very nice house. It's a very nice place of Washington, even today. It's just down the block from the cathedral. It's in that very lovely area of Washington. So Mother she was quite well. There was nothing wrong with her. And it was a very nice time, and she was so happy. You know, she was so pleased to have the baby girl. She spoiled her from then on. So, you know, Mother did very well. I'm very proud of her, and she overcame a stigma. And unfortunately, it's still there for Hope and a few other people. And it was not really, it really wasn't being crazy. It was just a depression. Today, they would have understood it more, but not now.
Yeah.
Not then. So those years in Washington, despite all the tension, were not too bad. But while we were there, we were, you know, planning to go back to Princeton. Everybody was going back to Princeton. But while we were, actually before we went, the year before the war, Jim went to a classical department meeting, a nationwide one, which we did every Christmas, to Trinity College at Hartford. And then he was, at that time, he was approached by the dean of Indiana University, Dean of Faculties, asking him if he would accept a job, take a job as chairman of the department at Indiana University. But of course, by that time, he said, I'm not because I'm going into the Navy, as he was working. They were working on the lessons from the Navy Department. So that was not going to happen. So about almost at the end of the war, Dean Payne came back and came to see us in Washington. And he came and I had him for dinner, and he approached Jim again and said they would really like, all the Midwest universities were trying to get Ivy League or expatriates from Europe into their universities. The Midwest was building up. So he asked him if he would consider the chairmanship of the department at Indiana. And David was sitting at the table at dinner. Oh, I don't want to go out to Indiana. They all talk Indian out there. he was about 6 years old, you know. It was a little embarrassing, but Dean Payne understood it perfectly well. So that was put on hold for a while because we intended to go back to Princeton. So within the next, I don't know the sequence of time, but within a short time, Jim said, I think we'd better go back and talk to Mike, who was the chairman. So we took the train back to Princeton and stayed with Mike in Virginia because he had gone back. He had gotten out of the Marines. Everybody was at that point going back. And so he'd gone back and was beginning to set things together again. And Mike said, you know, Pardo, I think it would be very good. We've got to get the plastics department in the Midwest built up. So Jim was a little hesitant because he hadn't been in doing anything, and to take on a chairmanship was a little, a little scary.
Mm-hmm.
But he and Jerry Elts, who was another colleague, was also approached, and another guy from Harvard was approached. So right after the war, the Midwest universities were building heavily.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what happened? We went.